I remember I had the perfect life, but I was dying inside. You see, being married for over a decade and living what some people would call the dream. You know, you're married, you got children, you got a house, beautiful house, great career. I didn't go out often, didn't go to the bars often. Just really did like the dad thing, you know, and obviously the husband thing, you know. But then I created this life that gave people the impression that I had the ideal, you know, marriage, the ideal family dynamics. But all the while, I was constantly questioning myself. Like, is this all that life has to offer? Is this really the person who I'm supposed to be with? You know, because there was a lot of tension, there was a lot of resentment and unresolved issues. We were both way too stubborn to give in to the other. We were, you know, that's probably the wrong choice of words, but we were both too stubborn to admit we needed counseling, right? We figured we'd figure it out on our own. We'd just get through it. We'd get by, you know, or one would submit, which was usually, you know, me, because that's what men do, right? We just kind of tap out just not to have to deal with it. And that's not the right thing. That's not the honorable thing. That's not like what a man is supposed to do, you know, because when you leave issues unresolved, they don't go anywhere. They stay right there at home. And that's exactly what I was dealing with. And I remember I was living a life where we weren't intimate. We had good times, definitely had good times, but there was a lot of, like, you know, tense times as well. There was a lot of times where it was almost combative. It was almost like we were like in this unspoken competition with each other of who's doing more, who's sacrificing the most, or who sacrificed the most. And that was toxic. It was toxic to the relationship. You know, I think the kids can feel it, although they were happy. I think for the most part, you know, children, they're aware, but they're still somewhat oblivious. They don't really know what's really going on behind closed doors in the bedroom. And let me tell you, as far as intimacy is concerned, there wasn't a whole lot. It really wasn't. It was a lot of just like sleeping next to a roommate. And yeah, I mean, it sounds harsh, but that's exactly like what the words that I would speak, you know, and into existence. And even though I thought that would submit her to, you know, feeling guilty and at least giving more effort, what it did was it had the opposite effect. You know, she would hold out even more and she would resent me even more. And it was more of a clash than it was pulling together. And I mean, that's natural though. You know, what was I thinking? You know, like what marriage counselor or what relationship coach would say, yeah, make them feel bad by throwing insults, right? So at the end of the day, you know, I know a lot of us are raised to believe that, like, you know, marriage is forever. You know, don't break that vow. And it's true that the intent, it makes sense. But the reality of it is, like, more than 50% of people, like, you know, go through a divorce. You know, I'm just giving some rough estimates, but I mean, it really feels like that. You know, people in my life, it's not uncommon for someone to say, yeah, I was previously married. And sometimes it's just that we marry someone we're not necessarily compatible with, but we marry someone who we get along really well with at a certain moment in our life. And we're not good at vetting our partners. We're not really good at really making that determination. Like, hey, if we go through this, you know, what would you do? What would be your expectation? So I do believe that marriage should be harder. I feel like you should work harder to be able to get married. Like, you know, like, I don't know, run a Spartan race, you know, marriage style, you know, and figure it out. Like it should be more of a challenge versus just filling out some documents, paying a fee. Wow, now we're married. I feel like you should have to go through, you know, hours and hours of coaching and training and counseling, just like a driver's test, right? You got to go to driver's school in certain states. It might make sense. I think there might be like a lot less divorces because there'd be a lot less marriages, right? People would think twice or thrice when it comes to who they are marrying. But at the end of the day, you know, like, your soul can only take so much. I have some family members, they're a little older, and these two individuals, they still have their arguments, and one still accuses the other of having an affair, you know, and like, I mean, come on, they're like in their 50s and 60s, but, you know, they're still talking about this, and, you know, they're not doing it to each other. Like, they're not, you know, having, you know, affairs, but I'm sure in the past, they probably had unresolved issues and it's still carrying over. And I can imagine as a man, you know, when I was going through it, you know, I at the time, I didn't cheat on my wife. I had not had an affair, but I was accused so often and so much that I felt like I might as well. If I'm going to be accused, if I'm going to feel like trash for something I haven't done, and I feel scared, like even having normal day-to-day conversations, I would feel scared. And I'm like nervous, right? Like, oh my God, would this be taken the wrong way? If I leave my phone down, is she going to think whatever? Can I joke with people? I was always second guessing myself, and you shouldn't have to do that. You shouldn't have to second guess yourself. But long story short, like the marriage, it was nice on the outside, but then people looking on, from the outer part of the marriage, they were completely unaware that I was walking around with a battlefield right in my mind. My heart was empty. It felt sad. There was no joy walking through the doors of my home when I came home. So there was a lot that I put myself through mentally and spiritually. And I can say the same for her, right? At the end of the day, we weren't compatible. We weren't a good mix from the very get-go. And my message to you is, if you're going through this, don't figure it out on your own. Don't try to, think that you got all the answers, because you don't. Just because your marriage may have started off on the wrong foot doesn't mean it needs to end on the wrong foot as well. You can absolutely get it back on track, but you got to make that decision. You got to decide, is all this fighting and is all this like unresolved issues, is it worth it? Is it worth trying to be right? And one of the advices I got from my mentors, it weighs heavy on me now, because I get what he was trying to say, but back then I took it for face value. He said, would you rather be right or would you rather be happy? And at first I was like, oh, well, why would I choose to be happy and let her think she's right? Because that doesn't make any sense. That's not right, because then our marriage is going to be built on a lie. But what he was trying to say is, do you want to outdo your partner, is what he was trying to say, or would you rather be happy, resolve it in a way to where you guys can grow closer together? And so it's not about being right or being wrong. It's about, can we resolve this together, not necessarily showing who's right and who's wrong.